Hello and welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Mowry of Drea Renee Knits, and today I am wearing the Ginny cardigan. This is knit up in Harrisville Nightshades. It's one of my favorites and it is named for my grandma Ginny, who taught me to knit. And this is coming out late. I was just a little too tired yesterday. I usually record these at least a day or two in advance and I just couldn't do it. So my apologies that this one is coming out late, but I am still gonna get it out there. I have not missed a week and I am not gonna start now. So let's start with some questions and then I have some fun show and tell at the end. So question number 1. Thank you for doing these videos. I've recently begun building up a knitting library. Could you share any of your most used reference books? Anything you'd recommend for anyone's library as a good source of information, tricks, and tips? So I love having a little fiber library. I've got weaving books and spinning books and of course knitting books. So I just went and grabbed a stack of the ones that I feel like I pull off of the shelf the most often. Plus just 1 or 2 fun ones. I am going to throw some links below, but there was some that I could not find a link for. So you might have to do some digging either at secondhand shops or the library. And of course it's a big stack, so it's all down below. So I'm going to have to keep leaning over to grab them. And I'm on this little wooden chair today. I had to grab a different chair because I was spinning up here the other day and my office chair is a rolly one and it doesn't work for spinning. I kept like rolling back and I'd have to scoot forward. So anyways, I'm on a very creaky old wooden chair. So my apologies for the creaking. All right, let's start off with, this is one of the ones I couldn't find a link for. I even went to Schoolhouse Press and they have the Knitting Around, they have a DVD, and I think it was, maybe it was even VHS. I don't know. I know they had a DVD, but I couldn't find the book on the site. Maybe I just didn't look thoroughly enough, but I couldn't find it. So, but here's one that I really enjoy, Knitting Around by Elizabeth Zimmerman. Also, I'm gonna, of course, now rearrange the orders. Another Elizabeth Zimmerman. So I would recommend anything by Elizabeth Zimmerman. And I actually do have one of her DVDs. My husband surprised me with one of her DVDs a few years ago for Christmas that I love. And I think it's even just like a learn to knit one, but I still will put it on, just have it in the background. But Knitting Without Tears, I think, is a great one. And there's just so much helpful information. The reason that I love Elizabeth Zimmerman books is because they're very conversational. She'll throw a story into the middle of it. So, I mean, I would laugh out loud. I just really enjoy the way she writes. But also, these were the books that I had when I really got back into knitting as a teenager and was playing around with kind of creating my own patterns. You know, this was pre-Ravelry. It was right around the time people were starting to do knitting blogs, but there wasn't yet necessarily a place to go just download a knitting pattern. Usually you'd go for books or magazines, maybe some patterns at your local yarn shop. So I also moved internationally during that time, and these were the books I had with me. And so when I wanted to knit something, I would reference these and just kind of wing it, thanks to her instructions. And I love it. They're really empowering because they're basically just like, grab your yarn, grab appropriate needles, figure out your gauge, and then do this. So I love all those. As far as sweater knitting and designing goes, I get a lot of questions about, you know, is there a book that you would go to? There are definitely books out there for knitwear design. Sorry, just look at this. And apparently sometime I was doodling and like colored in these fingernails. But the one that I grabbed for is this one, Knitting from the Top by Barbara Walker. This classic cover, and it's just great. I find it really helpful, and this is what got me on the way to sweater design. So I really like this one. Again, I like everything by Barbara Walker. I feel like you can't go wrong with her books, which brings me to her stitch dictionaries. So here are 2 of them. These are probably, I mean, you can see, and I go through and take these out regularly. and then look through them afresh and put in new ones. Like you can see, these ones are in pretty good shape. So I must have done that recently. These are my two favorite. There are, I believe, 4 of these. There's also a green and a yellow. And then she also has one just for mosaic knitting. But these first 2, I think these are 1 and 2, are the ones that I go to the most. And these are probably the most pulled books off of my shelf, besides Knitting from the Top. That one gets a lot of use too. But I love these stitch dictionaries. So if you like looking at different stitch patterns, I just love these books. I also wanted, I should probably not talk while I am leaning down below. I also had to grab my friend Andrea Rangel's stitch dictionary. I wonder if this is going to be backwards for y'all, because as I'm looking at this video, it is backwards. I don't know, maybe it flips after recording, but if these are all reading backwards to you, I apologize. So this is alternate, and this is kind of a more modern colorwork stitch dictionary. So lots of just really fun colorwork patterns. So I love stitch dictionaries. I love when I need new inspiration to just do some swatching and flipping through in books like this. So of course, the next one I'm going to show you is also a stitch dictionary. Up, down, all around. So this is Wendy Bernard's book, and she has quite a few. This is another one that didn't come up. I like to link to bookshop.org is usually one of my favorite places, or the first few are Schoolhouse Press, the publisher of those first few books. This specific one didn't come up. I'm sure you can find it at your library and other websites. But the one that did come up is the Knitting All Around, which I also have, but I didn't want to go swap them out. But what I love about Wendy's books is she put a new spin on stitch dictionaries by giving directions working from the bottom, the top, in the round, and flat. And she also, I believe, shows all of them or almost all of them written out and charted. So it's just so thorough, you know, I just loved that. So anyways, she has quite a few stitch dictionaries now. I know she has at least 3 because I own them. And I think there's another one that she recently published that's like the ultimate one. And I think it combines the previous stitch dictionaries and also puts in some new ones. But I haven't checked that one out. So if I am getting that wrong, sorry. But that could be a good one to look at too, because it seems to be like encompassing a lot of hers. But another good one. And another one that the link didn't come up for is Clara Parks' The Knitter's Book of Wool. I get a lot of questions about different wool, what you might use it for, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this is a great book for that. What I am linking to, because I think it would be even more helpful maybe for just hand knitters or crocheters, is the Knitter's Book of Yarn. So that's what I'm linking to below. But same author, Clara Parks. She also has Knitter's Book of Socks, and she also writes fabulous, would you call them a novel? Anyways, I'm just finishing up Vanishing Fleece, which is fabulous book. I highly recommend it. So all of her books are great as well. All of these people I have mentioned so far, I like all their books. All right, now this is the last one because I didn't want to make you sit here and look at my entire library. So I just grabbed a handful, but this is another one that I referenced a lot, especially in my early brioche days, and that is Knitting Fresh Brioche by Nancy Marchant. And it's fantastic. It has also has brioche stitch patterns. So Nancy loves to create stitch patterns, and I just am fascinated by the way her brain works because they're so beautiful and fun. But she also, in this book, has pictorials on how to do brioche techniques. So I think it's an absolute fantastic book. I've used it a ton. So if you are interested in a brioche book for your library, that is what I would recommend. And that's what I'm going to show for today. Again, there are so many. I have 3 different sections of books here in my studio, as well as a stack by my bed, because I do read like knitting and weaving books and stuff like that for fun before bed. And cookbooks will be in that stack as well. So there are more, but there's a little sampling of ones that I find myself grabbing again and again. And of course there are some links below, but if you just search any of those authors, you'll find some of their great books. Also check out your local yarn store. A lot of times they sell those books I mentioned. So there you go. I hope that helps. Next question. I have a swatching question, and I thought this was such a good one. Okay, I love all your questions. You're all special. Once you have determined your gauge with a particular yarn and needle size, do you create a new swatch when starting a new project if you're using the same yarn and the same needle size? Do you assume that you'll continue to knit with the same gauge using that same yarn, even if the color of the yarn is different? So, such an interesting question. And I actually years ago had the same thought, like, well, could I, a lot of us have our favorite go-to yarn. And so for me at that time, it was Brooklyn Tweed. It was my first introduction to breed specific woolen spun yarn. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my Desert Island yarn. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna swatch on a few different needle sizes, and I'm gonna keep those swatches, and now I'll never have to swatch this yarn again because boom, done. My answer to be a good person answering a knitting question and somebody who has taught knitting classes would say you should really re-swatch every time. And there's multiple reasons for that. One, I have heard from dyers that color 100% can impact. So different colors change like the physical weight of that yarn, and they absorb more and things like that. And it's really interesting if you've ever looked at undyed yarn or fiber compared to dyed yarn or fiber, it really changes. And so I do think that there could be discrepancies there. I also know that believe or feel that there are discrepancies when you think about every season. I mean, the fiber that we are spinning our yarns from, if you're using a wool-based yarn, say, those animals, depending on the weather, their diet, were they used that have babies? Was there a drought? Was there an issue with yada bada boo? Then that can change that fiber every single year. So chances of it being exactly the same is just really slim. And then think about all the other processes that are involved in dyeing and spinning yarn. There's a lot that goes into it, especially if you've just read Vanishing Fleece, which I am like half an hour out from finishing. So there's just so much that goes into it, and so many, what's the word I want? Variables. I love when the word comes when you want it to. So I apologize for all the and today. It's just an and day. And yeah, so I would say that if you happen to have all of this yarn in your stash and you used some for one project and then you decide to do another project and it did use the same needles and everything and it was the same yarn from the same lot, no, I wouldn't swatch again. But if it's not and you've bought this yarn fresh and there's been any kind of time between and it's from a different lot, I would recommend swatching again, especially because swatching is just knitting and we love knitting, and knitting is a slower process and a lot of our time and effort and money goes into it. So you want your end project to be exactly what you wanted from it. And so I think having that little bit of insurance by doing a quick little swatch is worth it. So that is my long-winded answer to your question. Yes, I would swatch again. Okay. I have never done brioche and I am thinking of trying this for the first time. Yay! I have knitted a lot of your patterns and I love the clear instructions. Thank you so much. So what pattern of yours would you advise for a novice brioche knitter? So I would recommend my Harlow hats, either the original or the worsted version. They're knit in the round, which when I teach brioche, I actually teach it flat in 2 colors, because my goal when I'm teaching brioche is I want everyone to learn like all the skills, or at least get them started, so that they can then go pick a project, whether it's flat or in the round, whatever it may be. But I do think that brioche in the round's a bit easier. So, or that's the feedback I've heard. It is relative to any individual knitter, but I think the Harlow hat is a great place to start because it's in the round, it's 2 color. 2 color I find to be a more intuitive way to learn brioche, because you can start to understand what's going on in your fabric a lot quicker than if you do 1 color, because you can see what's going on in there having those contrasting colors. Otherwise, sometimes in 1 color brioche, it just kind of feels a little bit like gobbledygook, because all of a sudden you have these extra strands going on, and it's easier to tell like who belongs to who when you're using 2 colors. So Harlow hat is what I would recommend. I actually designed that pattern with new briochers in mind as a great way to jump into brioche. There's a lot of video tutorials that I filmed to go with those patterns, and they're linked right in the pattern for you. So that is what I would recommend, and I'll throw a link for you below. All right, my question is about pockets. I recently made Winter's Beach Cardi, and I love that many of your patterns have pockets. I love pockets. Oh, and you love pockets. Do you have any tips for fortifying the pockets? I tend to put rather a lot of random stuff, including my phone, in pockets, and I'm worried the yarn will stretch, snap, or snag. Thank you in advance. So I feel ya. I love pockets. I think everything should have pockets, and my son agrees. So my 6-year-old actually has requested a sweater with very specific parameters that I'm like, I don't know if I can do all that. But one of his big things was, it has to have pockets, Mama. I like to put my hands in my pockets and my things in my pockets. So I agree. I love a pocket. But knit pockets are not very sturdy. You know, even my ready to wear sweaters, which I think I only have like 2 left. But I do have one that has pockets, and I will do things like put my phone in there. I can't show you my phone because it's what I'm recording on, but it's a honker and it's heavy, and I just feel like it like drags down my sweater, and I don't want it to stretch out. So all that to say is, I feel you. And my thought was, if you don't mind a little mixed media, would be reinforcing it with fabric, because fabric's not going to stretch. If you do like a little cotton or linen, you could sew that in to the inside of your sweater just to help carry that weight, and that wouldn't allow those stitches to then stretch out. So that's the one idea I had. I would love to hear if anybody else has ideas. And while I'm saying that, I have to say thank you all so much for chiming in on your favorite sock bind offs, because I can't wait to try some of them. I'm actually read them, and I'm gonna make a little list of ones to try, because I was really curious about a lot of them. So thank you to everyone who shared your sock bind off ideas. If y'all haven't checked those out, go back to the comments of my last video, because there was some good suggestions in there. But yeah, that is what I thought of as a way to kind of support that. And it's a nice way to use up scrap fabric. I have a couple little like basket things that I'll throw my scraps from when I'm sewing, because I just cannot throw them away. So I just keep putting them in there. I'm like, someday I'm gonna make a ridiculous quilt with all these. I mean, I've got to stop probably keeping the really tiny little pieces, but then you see people do cool things with them, and I'm like, see, that's why you keep them. Okay. Last question. I was about to cast on the throwback cardi, feeling all excited, and then noticed that the collar is picked up from the cast on edge later. Could you recommend a cast on method that would be best for going back and picking up stitches later? My go-to is twisted German cast on, but can do others. What would look best or be easiest for subsequent picking up of stitches? I loved this question again. Y'all just ask great questions. So I love a twisted German cast on for picking up stitches because you have perfect little gaps to go into. Like, they're really perfect. So if you love a twisted German cast on, I would go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I default to a long tail. I think either would be great, and that's what I would do. If twisted German is one of your faves, I would stick with that. All right, how are we doing on time? Not too bad. Okay, so I linked to, but then forgot to say, the spinning podcast I've been watching and really loving. So I made sure that I could not forget this week. And so she has 2 different names on YouTube and Instagram. So that's why I didn't say it 2 weeks ago when I first wanted to mention her, because I was afraid I was going to say the wrong one. So I wrote them out, being a good little YouTuber over here. So her name is Tashi, and her YouTube is Stitches and Starlight. Her Instagram, which I also highly recommend, is Tangles and Starlight. But Tashi, I have had a few people come up to me when I've taught or at Rhinebeck last year, and they say that they feel like this podcast is like hanging out with a friend, like we're just sitting together and hanging out, which I absolutely love. Like, that is so, just makes me so happy. That is how I feel about Tashi's. I giggle, I shake my head in agreement, like, I know, me too. And so anyways, fantastic. She does a ton of spinning and is my inspiration for wanting to dip my toes, just one toe, all the toes, into processing a fleece. And she actually did from her fleece my flicker and flame hat, and it's so beautiful. She shows it in one of her episodes, but she also of course knits, and I've seen her do some sewing on there. So anyways, it's just a fantastic YouTube, especially if you're into spinning. I highly recommend checking her out. And thank you to everyone who, through the other YouTubers that you love to watch, especially in regards to spinning and processing fleece and everything. The other week when I mentioned it, I'm super excited to go check them out. So thank you everyone for sharing. All right. As a recap, there are still some knit-alongs going on. There is the Big Cozy knit-along hosted by my friend Candace of the Farmer's Daughter Fibers. There's also the Insta Friends knit-along hosted by my friend Jess from Shop La Mercerie. That one's on Instagram. And of course, there is the Weekender Spin It to Knit It knit-along, which is why I have some exciting news to share with you today. Oh, darn it. The big reveal ruined by my swatch. I did it. I finished spinning. Well, I kind of finished. I'll get into that in a minute. I finished spinning my yarn for the Weekender, and I could not be more stoked about it. I ended up spinning, I think, like 8 or 9 bobbins and plied it this week. I have 3 more of these beauties in the bath downstairs soaking. I like to soak my yarn in fairly hot water, and I just leave it in there till the water's cool, and then I take it out and snap it. And I'm so excited. I am so excited with how it turned out. They are so squishy. I did have a complete moment that I've had all throughout this process of, oh, should I change my mind? Is this the right decision? And all of a sudden I was like, what if I just did a 2-ply? So the plan was 3-ply, which is here. Here's my swatch. This is on 8s and 9s, which are big needles for me. I don't do a ton of knitting on 8s and 9s, but it's kind of there. That's a little nicer. There's the other side. So I just had a moment of, what if I just did a 2-ply? I'm gonna get way more yarn, and you know, I love a sport weight, which is what it would have been. So I had spun 1 bobbin on my electric spinner. I do love, I have a Hanson mini spinner, and I love it when I just want to be able to sit on my sofa next to Spicy Pete and my kiddos, and we watch a movie and I can spin from there. Because otherwise, if I spin on my wheel, while we hang out together. I'm kind of off in the corner. It's a little lonely. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to spin up a little on my electric spinner. I then doubted myself. I was like, I don't trust that I'm going to remain consistent playing with these two different wheels that are so different from each other. So I had a little bit on one of the bobbins. So I decided to just wind it off into a center pole ball and ply a 2-ply and see what I think. And then I swatched, and I swatched a lot. I did a size 4, 5, and a 6. And I actually loved the fabrics at all those different needle sizes. But then I was like, you know, Andrea, why do you gotta mess with things? Just let it ride. You wanted a 3-ply, you wanted a worsted weight. Why are you trying to add more decision making? So I was like, okay, I just need to hang out. I have to just like sit with my swatches and just think about it. So it took me at least a full week to decide, but I came to the conclusion that I was gonna stick with my 3-ply worsted weight, and I'm really happy I did. I'm really excited with how this yarn turned out. There you go, a little beauty shot for you. Again, my light in here is warm because it is a little dark outside. Y'all, it just started snowing. We're only gonna get like an inch, but I'm pretty thrilled. We are not getting any snow this year, and it's making me a little sad. So I am gonna make Spicy Pete go on a walk with me in the snow. Anyways, so here's, I'll show you the different skeins. So you can see there is the dominant little tweedy bits in here are turquoise, but there is also a decent amount of like little pinks and purples, and every once in a while you get a little pop of like bright yellow. So, and there is even some like a little bit of red in some of them. So yeah, I've got 3 skeins dyeing, but so I came up here this morning all ready to do this, and I have a little table right here, and this is kind of like a landing pad for, you know, here's some of my hand spun, here's some yarn I can't wait to knit with. By the way, I should show you this real quick. This is from the Wandering Flock, and can we talk about these colors? This is my little Christmas present to myself. Apparently that's becoming a yearly tradition for me, is to treat myself to some Wandering Flock, because I can't handle, these are my ideal colors right here, just all together. But got my sewing notebook. It's just a little landing pad. So I'm up, I'm at my computer, and all of a sudden I looked at it, I'm like, what is that? That, my friends, is an entire bobbin of singles for this yarn that I forgot about. This is why you should keep all your, you should be more organized. I should be more organized. So now I don't know what to do. I'm curious. So again, I have 6 skeins, and I did ply them on my Hansen. I have not weighed them, but they're big. I don't know. I'll have to figure out what the yardage is, but I'm like, what do I do with this? Because of course I have like a little bit left on this bobbin, and I already wound off. I like to put my odds and ends. I have dreams. Again, I can't throw away the little leftover bits. So I have dreams of just doing like a little Franken yarn someday with all these ends. So I put them on toilet paper rolls, and I just have a basket of them. So I'm like, okay, do I chain ply? Do I do a 3-ply with this much and then switch over to a chain ply? Do I just save this and ply it randomly? I mean, I do love to do a combination spin. Do I just throw it into a different yarn? I don't know what to do. What should I do? Help me. So anyways, but I am excited. I can't wait to cast on. I, of course, am gonna play around with the pattern because, you know, gotta get my kicks somewhere. But yeah, all right. Well, I think that's all from me today. I think I've shared all my things. I'm so excited it's snowing, so I'm gonna go get on my boots. I'm gonna go for a walk. I hope that y'all have a lovely weekend, and tell me what you're up to. And I can't wait to see you back here next week, I hope. And I guess that's all. Happy making. Bye. Oh, though, one more thing. The shift again comes out next week, so keep an eye open for that. If you are not already subscribed, I highly recommend you subscribe to my newsletter, which you can find a link at the very bottom of the show notes below, and that way you can be the first to know when it is available. And I always sneak a little discount code in there for my subscribers, because I am just so grateful to everyone who takes their time to spend time with me, either via my newsletter or here on YouTube. And now that's all. I hope you have a great weekend, and I hope to see you next week. Bye.